Hello, my name is Melissa Hernes, and I am a third-year vet student at Texas A&M University. Just a little bit about myself. I'm interested in being a small animal veterinarian for dogs and cats, and I've always been interested in veterinary medicine ever since I was a little girl, and so now I'm finally here. And today I'm going to talk to you about pregnancy and parturition. My presentation is called The Path to Puppies. Okay, so first we need to talk about some terms. I'm sure most of y'all already know what pregnancy means, but just to give it a definition, pregnancy is the state of carrying, developing embryos or fetuses in the female body. Now, about parturition, a lot of y'all probably haven't heard of this word before, but basically parturition is the process of giving birth to offspring. So basically, just giving birth. Okay, so we need to talk a little bit about background of the female reproductive tract of dogs. First of all, I'm going to use a demonstration here. This is called a plastinated model, and it's actually the inside of a dog, and it's just preserved in a way that kind of feels like plastic, so we can use it to teach other people about the anatomy or the body of dogs. And right here, there's two little ovaries. And the ovary is the place where the ova, or the egg, is made and released from. And then you can see there's kind of like two long, almost string-like tubes coming down, making a Y. And those are the uterine horns. And to connect the ovary to the uterine horn, there's a little tiny tube called an oviduct. And so here we have the uterus. And that is the place that holds the growing fetuses or the growing puppies while the mother is pregnant. So you can see how this is really skinny. Well, actually it just stretches and gets very big and distended when the mother is pregnant. And also it's interesting that dogs have a Y-shaped uterus. So you can see there's two long horns and then a short body. And that's because they have litters or multiple puppies at one time. They don't have just one dog, one baby born. They have, 5 or 6, sometimes even up to 13. So they're all going to line up inside of the uterus. And other animals that have litters, like pigs and cats, are also going to have this Y-shaped uterus where they have long uterine horns and short uterine bodies. But animals such as horses or cows that only have one baby at a time, they have just a big uterine body. So it kind of shows you how the form of the uterus meets its function. And so the next part of the anatomy is the cervix. And it's kind of farther down in here. You can't really see it on this model, but I'll just tell you about it. I like to think about the cervix if you had a long tube and you just squeezed it at one point. That is the cervix. And it basically acts as a gateway to keep out bacteria and everything from getting into the uterus while the mother's pregnant. Because if bacteria got in there, then the baby might get sick, get an infection. So it basically just acts as a barrier. And then, of course, we have the pelvic canal, which is the birth canal, and that's what the fetus is expelled through and is born into the outside world. Okay, and if you look on the PowerPoint right now, there's two views. These are views terms we use in veterinary medicine: lateral view, dorsal view. Basically what a lateral view is, this is my demonstration dog here. If you were looking at the side of a dog this way, that's a lateral view. And so as you can see, it's kind of showing you where the ovary and the cervix is on a lateral view. It would be kind of like the ovaries up here, and it leads down to the uterus and the cervix. And a dorsal view would be if we were looking over it from the back, just like this, if you're looking on this way. And so you can see the Y-shaped uterine tract from the dorsal view. Okay, so we have to start from the very beginning with conception, which is the formation of an embryo. And an embryo is formed when the egg becomes fertilized and starts growing from one single cell into thousands and then millions. What about the genes? And no, I'm not talking about blue genes. I'm talking about genes, which is a term we use that talks about kind of DNA. It's something that holds information to build and maintain an organism's cell and pass traits on to its offspring. Some of y'all may have learned about the cell and the different parts of it, and if you know about the nucleus, that's where the DNA is. And basically it acts as a blueprint. If you think about a house, you know, an architect is going to have a blueprint and it's going to tell everybody how to build that house. Well, you can kind of think about the DNA as the blueprint. It's going to tell the cell how to build things, how to make proteins that it might secrete, how to make different things that it needs to replace. So that's what DNA is. And we're going to talk a little bit about how puppies will get their DNA from their mother and the father. Okay, and this slide is just showing that it's kind of the different units of DNA. DNA is like the smallest unit, and a bunch of DNA is wound together in a double helix form, and one section is called a gene. And we use the term gene to kind of define a specific area of the DNA. So to compare with the blueprint, you know, you'd say, oh, this is the specific part of the blueprint that's going to tell us how to make the kitchen. Well, that would be like the kitchen gene. So kind of think about that way. So there's different genes that might say, okay, this gene is going to tell what color eyes the dog's going to have, or what color coat it's going to have. It's just kind of a defined section that gives that information. And then a bunch of genes are going to form together and make a chromosome. And so chromosomes are just like really big chunk of DNA and genes. Okay, so in each cell of the dog, all the cells, there are 39 pairs of chromosomes, which makes a total of 78. So on this slide, you can see there's something called a karyotype. And that is just showing how many chromosomes there are in the dog's cell. And this is an actual picture of the chromosomes. They have this microscope that's very, very, very strong, and it can see all the way to the level of a chromosome, which is smaller than a cell, smaller than a nucleus. And as you can see, there's the numbers 1 through 39, and there's two little chromosomes under each one, and those are pairs, and so they have the exact same information. So basically there's a backup for every chromosome. So there's 78 total. Okay, well then we have to get the gamete, which is the egg or the sperm. And each gamete has half the genetic information needed to make the total baby. So if you think about it, we have 39 chromosomes from the mother. So if you thought about that karyotype and you just took one from each pair, you'd have 39 chromosomes from the mother. And then if you think about the father and you took one from each of his pairs, then you'd have 39 chromosomes from the father. And when the egg and sperm combine, you get 78 chromosomes total, and the genetic information is made complete. So that's why, you know, we sometimes look like our dads and look like our moms, because we get half from each of them. And it's the same with dogs. Some of them, you know, if you have a yellow Labrador Retriever and a black Labrador Retriever, and one's the mother and one's the father, you can have puppies. Some of them will be black, some of them will be yellow. It'll just all depend on their genetics. Okay, so next we need to talk about embryology, which is the study of the growing embryo. And we'll talk about what embryo means in just a minute. But once the egg is fertilized, it starts dividing and multiplying exponentially. And some of y'all may have learned about exponential growth in math, and it's sometimes compared to linear growth. Well, exponential growth means that if you have something, you're going to multiply it by 2 each time. So it's basically doubling and doubling and doubling. Linear growth would be if you just kept adding 1 cell each time. So it'd just be growing. So you'd have 1 cell, then you'd have 2 cells, then you'd have 3 cells and 4 cells. Exponential growth, you'd have 1 cell, and then it's going to double to 2 cells, just like our PowerPoint here. Then it's going to double to 4 cells, then to 8, and then to 16, and it'll just keep going. And as you can see, it's going to multiply a lot faster than if you just did linear growth and kept adding 1 at a time. And that's really important because, as you may know, The body is made up of millions and millions of cells, not just, a few hundred cells. So it's going to take a lot of cells to make this growing puppy, and it's important that they're able to multiply rapidly, or else the mother would be pregnant forever. So that's the importance of exponential growth. So now, once we have this large group of cells that have been multiplying, the next step is they're going to start differentiating, a process of differentiation. And this is when the clump of cells starts to change and form different types of tissues, and then form organs, and then organ systems. And so just to talk a little bit about what each one of those is, the cell is the smallest unit of the living body. And when you get a group of cells that have the same function and texture, that's what we call a tissue. And so an example of a type of tissue would be muscle. So it's a bunch of muscle cells working together to make a contraction. Well, an organ is two or more types of tissues that combine to serve a specific function. An example of that would be a stomach. So in the stomach, you have muscle tissue and you have skin tissue, and they're all working together to digest food. And then an organ system is several organs that work together to serve a specific function. The example I have is the digestive system. And so you don't have just the stomach. You have the esophagus and the stomach and the small intestines and the large intestines. And all of these different organs are working together to, digest food and absorb the nutrients and excrete waste and all of those things. So all of this is going on while the baby puppy is forming inside of the mother. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is an embryo. Well, we have the development of the embryo, and that is what we call the puppy from the point when the egg is fertilized until the body is fully developed. It's just miniature in size. And if you look at the PowerPoint slide, as you can see, that is a picture of a puppy embryo. And I mean, if you look at that, that doesn't really look like a puppy to you. It's like, where are the ears? Where's its nose? It, just has some tiny little buds for arms. And that's an embryo because it's not fully developed yet. Okay, so then we have another term that is the fetus, and we have the growth of the fetus. Well, the embryo is going to keep growing and forming, and it's eventually going to look exactly like a little puppy. It's just going to be very small, and that's what we call the fetus. So once the embryo is fully developed, it still needs time to grow while it's in the mother's womb. And the fetus is what we call the puppy once it is fully developed but still growing. So if you look at the picture on the PowerPoint slide, you can tell that that's a puppy, puppy fetus inside of the mother. It has fur, it has ears, and it has a nose. But as you know, once it's first developed, it still needs time to grow. So that way, when it's born, it's big enough to survive outside of the mother's womb. And here's just a fun little game that I wanted to show you. Each one of those pictures is a different species. It's an embryo of a different species. So one of them might be a salamander, one of them might be a human or a dog. And I just wanted each of y'all to take a moment and guess if you could figure out which one is which. Okay, so I'm going to go on and give you a little bit more of a clue and see if you can figure out which one is which now. So this is the embryo a little bit further along in the development. And remember, each one of them is a different species of animal. Okay, how about now? As you can see at the bottom of the slide, there are a bunch of different species. I hope you can guess which one they are now. I'll go ahead and give you the answers. There's a fish, a salamander, a tortoise, a chicken, a pig, a cow, a rabbit, and a human. And I just wanted to show you that's very interesting. Early on in the embryonic development, each one of these species looks very similar. It kind of just looks like a little shrimp or something. But as the process of differentiation continues, the DNA inside of the cells is going to say, hey, we're supposed to be a human, we don't need a tail anymore. Or, hey, we're a tortoise and we need a shell. And so the cells are going to make those things that the DNA is telling it that it needs. And so it's also kind of another theory is that the reason all the embryos look so similar early on is that it's kind of showing about evolution, and that we all started similar, but then our DNA is going to tell us, make us different, and we're going to develop differently. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the placenta. So you may be asking, what is a placenta? Well, it's a temporary organ formed in the uterine wall of the mother that is connected to the fetus via an umbilical cord. And we say temporary organ because it's only present while the mother is pregnant. And so I like to think about it as little fingers kind of going into the uterine wall. Remember we talked about the uterus, and that's where the babies are. They're kind of like going into the uterine wall and growing into the wall. And so it's kind of like this lining, and then it's going to come together and form the umbilical cord. And basically, I like to think about the puppies as floating in a sack of water, like a water balloon, and that's called the amniotic sac. And it's just going to kind of provide them with like a cushion around them. And the umbilical cord is going to be connecting to them, and we're going to talk next about what the placenta does. Well, if you think about it, if you're floating in a sack of water, it might be difficult to breathe. We know that all cells need oxygen, and they need to get rid of carbon dioxide, and also they need nutrients to grow. Well, how are they going to get this oxygen and this nutrients if they're stuck in this sack of water? Well, that's what the placenta and the umbilical cord is for. Basically, the placenta connects the blood of the mother to the blood of the baby. And what happens is the mother will breathe in oxygen through her lungs, and it will oxygenate her blood, and that blood's going to travel through her body to the placenta, go through the placenta and the umbilical cord to the baby, to all of the baby fetus's cells, and it will bring them oxygen. And then the cells will get rid of their carbon dioxide, and it'll travel all the way through the baby's blood to the umbilical cord, to the placenta, all the way back to the mother's lungs, and the mother dog will breathe out and release that carbon dioxide. And so that's the purpose of the placenta. And also, it's needed for nutrients. There's nutrients in the blood. You might have heard of your blood sugar being high or low. Well, there's sugar in the blood of dogs. It's not exactly the sugar that we think about, like table sugar. It's called glucose. And that's going to travel in the blood to the cells of the growing baby, and it can provide it with energy, because we know that all living cells need energy to grow and do their job. And so that's what the placenta is for nutrients, for gas exchange, which is the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, and also for waste elimination. Okay, so we're going to talk about gestation length now. Gestation length is the length of time from conception, from when the egg and the sperm meet, to birth. As you can see, I can show the cell, that's like the new cell that was formed, all the way till we have a new baby puppy. So this slide has a bunch of different species of animals on it. There's a horse, a cat, a dog, an elephant, and a human mammals. And underneath them is the gestation length in days of each one of them. So the horse has a gestation length of 335 days, so that's how long it's pregnant. The dog is 63 days, the cat is 63 days, an elephant is 625 days, and the human is 270 days. Okay, and I wanted you to think about this for a moment and think if you can find any connections that has to do with the type of animal or human and how long its gestation length is. Okay, so some of y'all may have said, well, the bigger the animal, the longer the gestation length, and that's definitely true. As you can see, horses and elephants are much bigger than dogs and cats, and their gestation lengths are longer, and human beings as well. Another interesting thought or theory is that Animals that are predators, like dogs and cats, maybe their gestation length doesn't need to be as long, because when their babies are born, they're able to have a den where they can kind of like hide them away from other animals that might want to come and attack their baby. This is in the wild, wild wolves or lions or whatever. And so those babies can be born less developed because the mother's able to like hide them. Well, if you think about a horse or an elephant in the wild, these are prey species. Once those babies are born, they need to be up and ready and able to run away from predators as fast as they can, because their herds are just moving constantly. So maybe they need a little bit longer gestation length, so when they're born, they're more developed and ready to just run away from those predator species. Whereas dogs and cats, when they're born, maybe they're not as developed because they're able to be hidden in their den, and their eyes aren't open, their ears aren't open, so they're kind of more vulnerable, but their mothers are able to hide them and protect them. Okay, so now we have a pregnant dog. Can y'all think of any signs that you might be able to guess that the female is pregnant? A lot of people like to say, oh, well, they're going to have, a big belly. And of course that is true, but actually they don't start gaining weight and getting a big belly until 4 weeks after they've been pregnant. And if you think about their pregnancy, you said it was 63 days, so that's about 2 months. 4 weeks is 1 month. So you don't even start seeing the distended belly and the weight gain until they've already been pregnant half the time that they're going to be pregnant. Also during that time, around 4 weeks, they're going to start eating more because, of course, they have these growing puppies inside of them. They're going to need more food. But some other things that maybe you didn't know is that once the mother dog is closer to giving birth, she might start doing something that we call nesting behavior. And that's kind of shown by the dog on the blue blanket. Basically, they try to go hide somewhere, maybe in a closet or something. They might get clothes together, and they're trying to make a little nest where they're going to have their puppies, and it's just an instinctual behavior. They want to be somewhere that they feel is safe, away from predators, even though there are pets and they don't really have predators. It's just kind of an instinct, and so they might start, hiding somewhere, having blankets around them. And another thing is right before they give birth, days to hours, they're going to have a drop in temperature. So breeders or veterinarians that might be monitoring a mother dog very closely you take the temperature every 2 or 3 hours, and you'll see a slight drop, and that's how they can know that, okay, we're about to have puppies. Well, there's also some specific tools that veterinarians use to diagnose pregnancy. One of the main tools is radiographs, which are x-rays. And you can see the little baby fetal skeletons by day 42 in the gestation length. The babies have skeletons before that, but they're made of cartilage, which is kind of like what our ears are made of and what our noses are made of, and it's not bone. It doesn't start forming bone until day 42, and you can't really see cartilage on x-rays. When we think of x-rays, we think of the skeleton, which are bones, so that's when their cartilage starts turning into bone, and we can see all the little skulls and spines and everything. And that's a really important way for veterinarians to find out how many puppies there are, because that's a good thing to know. Say you have a dog and it's giving birth, and it's given birth to 8 puppies, and she just stops, and you think, oh, okay, there's only 8 in there and she's done. Well, there might be one more in there that was trapped in a certain way or was just sicker, and so if that stays in there, the mother is going to get really sick because it's going to get infected and the puppy may die. And so it's important for us to know how many there are so we can count them all at the end and make sure that all of the mother has given birth to all of her puppies. Another tool that veterinarians use is ultrasound, which is maybe you've heard of your mom or a friend's mom going to get an ultrasound done when they've been pregnant. Think they get a little black and white grainy picture, and it kind of looks like a baby, but it doesn't really look like a baby to you, maybe. Well, that's ultrasound, and how that works is it's kind of like echolocation. Maybe you've heard about that with bats. They send out, a sound wave, and then it bounces off something and it comes back. Well, ultrasound, there's an ultrasound probe that sends out a sound wave into the body. You hold it up against the the abdomen of the mother dog. You would hold it like that, and it's sending out the sound wave, and it's going to go into the organs and bounce off of them and come back, and it'll make a picture showing us, what's inside of the mother. And we can see little heartbeats of the puppies by day 25. So that's the earliest way that we can diagnose pregnancy. So if there's a breeder, someone that's really wanting to find out if their dog's pregnant because, they are going to sell the puppies and they want to know, then this would be the earliest way that we could find out. And there's also measurement of certain hormones in the blood that we can measure. Okay, so here is a radiograph of a pregnant mother. And as you can see, there's all of those little fetal skeletons in there. And, it's pretty fun to try to figure out how many there are. Maybe one of you could go try to count how many little baby skeletons you see. It's not always as straightforward as you think it might be. Some of you may have said 3 or 4. I would probably guess 4 or 5. But so that's kind of getting to play veterinarian for a minute there. Okay, so next we're going to talk about parturition, which remember earlier in our discussion of definitions is the birthing process. And we're going to talk about a hormone cascade and positive feedback system. And I'm sure those are a lot of words that y'all haven't heard, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you what a positive feedback system is. We like to think about it like the snowball effect. So basically there's going to be something that happens and it's going to trigger a signal, and that will make that same thing keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. So kind of a snowball effect. The opposite of that would be a negative feedback system where something happens and that causes a signal to stop whatever is going on. And then hormones are proteins in the blood that actually act as like signaling. There's little signals in the blood that are telling different organs to do different things. So all of this starts with fetal stress when the puppies are ready to be born and they kind of start getting stressed, and they're going to send stress hormone into the blood, and it'll go to the mother's brain, and that's what's going to start everything. So here we have a picture. You can see up at the top is mother's brain, and there's the word hypothalamus there, which is a specific part of the mother dog's brain that secretes hormones, which is what we were just talking about. So like we said, the puppies are going to be stressed, and they're going to release stress hormone called cortisol. And that's going to go in the mother's blood all the way up to her brain, and the brain is going to say, oh, I see that the puppies are stressed. I'm going to release a hormone called oxytocin. And so oxytocin is going to travel in the blood of the mother's body all the way to her uterus, and it's going to make the wall of the uterus contract. And that's going to start pushing the puppies out. And then remember how we talked about the cervix? It's like a tight tube. Well, the puppies are going to start hitting the cervix, and that's going to send a signal to the mother's brain to release more oxytocin. And so as you can see, more oxytocin is going to, let's just pretend like my hand is the uterine wall and this is the cervix. And so the mother's brain is going to send more oxytocin, which is going to make the uterine wall, push harder, and that's going to push more on the cervix, which will go back to the mother's brain and release more oxytocin, and eventually, the baby is born that way. And so that's just a little bit about the hormone positive feedback system during birthing. Okay, what about complications? Well, everything doesn't always go perfectly when mother dogs are trying to give birth to their babies. Sometimes the babies are just too big to actually go through the pelvic canal of the mother. Here we have another plastinated model, and if you look this way, this circle right here is the pelvic canal, and it is bone. It's the pelvic bones of the dog. So as you know, bones don't give very easily. They're not like soft tissue that can stretch and stuff like that. They're pretty fixed. So if you have, a baby puppy like this that's trying to go through bone and it's just too big to fit, then that's not going to work. The puppy is going to get stuck, and we need to help them. And another complication that can happen is just the mother gets too tired, her muscles get too tired, and her uterine muscles get too tired, and she just physically can't continue to push out the babies anymore. And so in that case, we also need to help. And what we're going to do is something called a C-section or a cesarean section. And if you look at the pictures on the PowerPoint, you can see there's like a green drape with some kind of pink thing on there. Well, what there is underneath the drape is a mother dog, and she's laying on her back, and there is a drape over her like this. And the veterinarian will make a skin incision or cut into the skin, and will get into the abdomen, and will pull out the uterus with the baby puppies in it. And that's what that picture is. That's what the pink thing is. You can see it's the uterus with those baby puppies inside of it. And then the veterinarian will cut open the uterus with another incision and will pull out the baby puppies. And then you have to kind of rub them vigorously and get them awake and let them know that they've been born. Because if you think about, when a puppy is born, it's going through the pelvic canal, and it's kind of turbulent and getting all bounced around, and that's going to wake it up. Well, if we just take it out of the mother, then it doesn't quite realize that it's born. So we got to move it and wake it up, and maybe sometimes you can use little suction bulbs to get some of the fluid out of its mouth, and it'll start breathing. And then the veterinarian has to sew back together the uterus in the dog and sew back up the skin, or suture is what the term veterinarians use. And then the mother's good to go, and you have the little baby puppies. Okay, so now that we have our newborn puppies, we need to talk about how to take care of them and how to make sure that the mother's taking care of them. And a really big part of that is nursing, which is the puppies drinking the mother's milk. It is very, very important for newborn puppies to drink the milk of their mother. Not only does it provide a source of food that's easy to digest, because if you think about it, these baby puppies, they are not, quite ready to do. You can't just throw them dog food that you would feed your normal dog. Their digestive systems, their stomachs and intestines aren't quite developed enough to handle that. And so they need something that's really easy to digest. And the mother dog's milk is that perfect thing. It just very easy on the stomach, and they can get all the nutrients they need that way. But there's also another important reason why the dogs need to nurse, and this is actually for all animals, including humans, is that they can get immunity from drinking the mother's milk. They can get something called antibodies. And the way this works is adult animals get antibodies when their body is exposed to something like bacteria or viruses, just something that it'll get into the body, and there's white antibodies, or there's white blood cells, and they come in and they recognize that, okay, this is something that's bad. We don't want this in the body. And they will send signals to make antibodies, and antibodies will come and they'll surround the bacteria, and they kind of stick to it, and they act as little flags. So other cells will come and just destroy the bacteria or the virus or whatever was in the body. And so basically it's through exposure to bacteria, viruses, how adult animals get antibodies. Well, baby puppies have been inside of the mother's womb. They haven't had a chance to be exposed to bacteria and viruses, and so they have no antibodies. Well, when they drink the milk of the mother, they get the antibodies from the mother, and those will last them a while until they're able to make their own antibodies because they've been exposed to different things. There's also some key things we need to monitor in the newborn puppy. First of all, they need to be weighed every day when they're very young, and that's to make sure that they are eating, because you may have, 10 or 12 little puppies, and they're all trying to drink from the mother, and you can't just sit there all day long and watch and make sure that each one of them is drinking long enough. And, they're actually fighting and trying to, get the best milk, and some of them may end up not getting any milk at all. And if that happens, then they're going to get sick and not do well. So we need to make sure that they're eating. And if they're not gaining enough weight, then you can put them alone with the mother so they don't have to compete with their brothers and sisters for milk. Also, their temperature needs to be monitored. Little puppies can become cold very easily. They can't even shiver until they're 6 days old. And actually what shivering does, it's, your muscles are shaking back and forth. Well, if you think about like friction, like when you rub your hands together, it gets warm. Well, when the muscles are shaking back and forth, they're creating friction and they're warming the body. Well, the little puppies can't even do that until they're 6 days old, so their body has no way to warm itself. So they need to be kept in an environment that is warm, at least 86 degrees Fahrenheit. If you think about it, it's pretty warm. It's like a summer day. So they need to be kept in an area that's really warm. That's why you might see like heating lamps or lots of blankets around newborn puppies. And so you can actually take their temperature and make sure that they are the right temperature and they're not getting too cold. So another thing that it might be a little gross, but I think it's actually pretty neat, is that the mother has to help them urinate and defecate until they're like 10 to 15 days old. And what the mother does is she's going to lick the rear end area, and that's going to cause the baby puppies to urinate and defecate, and she may actually eat it. And that is an instinct that's developed from the wild. If you think about wolves and their den areas, well, if they had these puppies that just urinated and defecated everywhere, it's going to start smelling really strongly. And that would then predators, say there's a cougar or something that wants to come eat these wolf puppies, well, it would be able to smell that area very easily if there was lots of feces and urine around. And so the mother is going to keep the area very clean by, regulating when the babies are going to, go to the bathroom and kind of eating it and keeping it clean so that the cougar can't find out where this den area is. And then the last thing is that you might want to look for body defects. A common one is called a cleft palate. If you think about like the roof of your mouth, that's your palate, and dogs have the same thing, that's their palate. And sometimes it's clefted, which means that there's a hole in it, it's not complete, and so that can cause a lot of problems. You just want to make sure that they don't have those. Okay, and just some fun facts about puppies and what you might need to know if you're going to be an owner and your dog's going to have puppies is that they open their eyes when they're 10 to 15 days old. They open their ears when they're 15 to 17 days old. And then you can start weaning the puppies when they're 3 to 4 weeks old. And weaning is when you're going to be able to take them away from the mother, away from drinking the milk, and kind of start feeding them a dog food. And it's a process. It's not just one day. You can take them away and give them dry dog food and they'll be fine. You'll kind of have them maybe, not drink the mother's milk as long, and you'll start, getting some dog food and mixing up with milk or water and making a gruel paste. And you can see on the slide the picture of all the puppies around that kind of big bowl with gruel in it. And then eventually they'll just start eating all of the gruel, and then you can slowly give them just dry dog food without the water or milk mixed in. And so it's a process, but they start that 3 to 4 weeks of age. And then another really important thing is the socialization period, which is 4 to 12 weeks of age. And there's lots of behavioral studies that have been done, and this is a real thing, is dogs when they're 4 to 12 weeks need to be introduced to other dogs, to people, all kinds of people, children, adults, babies, and cats and birds, and any kind of, other animals or humans that this dog may be around. And what happens is when it's that young, it's going to see these things, it's going to meet a child, it's going to meet another dog, and it's going to play with them and have fun and realize that, this is good. This is something that, this is not a threat to me. If a dog, for example, missed its socialization period and it didn't get to meet other dogs and it didn't get to meet kids, then maybe it would think, as it's an adult dog, well, I don't know if this dog is okay. I don't know if this human's okay. Maybe it's going to attack me, and so it might be aggressive or, mean and growl at those dogs or humans. And so it's really important during that socialization period time to introduce them to all different things and make sure that they know that they're okay and they're their friends and not their enemies and aren't going to threaten them. Okay, so here's just kind of in summary a timeline we have, and as you can see, day 1 is conception, and the red line is gestation length, and that's what we talked about from conception until birth, which is 63 days long in the dog. Then we have the embryonic period, which is the green line, which is conception until the body is fully developed. We have the fetal period, which is the purple line, and that's from when the baby puppy's body is fully developed until it's born. And then, of course, the eyes open around 10 days after that. Then another 5 days the ears open, and then we can do the weaning where we take them off the mother's milk and then start the socialization period. So in summary, a puppy is conceived and it gets half of its genetic information from the mother and half from the father. The embryo develops into a fetus that grows in the womb. During the birthing process, there are many hormones that are part of a positive feedback loop that ultimately cause contractions of the uterus. And newborn puppies must be monitored closely to ensure that they are eating, gaining weight, and maintaining a proper body temperature. Thank you very much.